So in both formulations, one of the oils that we use is castor oil, and castor oil is definitely an Ayurvedic oil that's been used for millennia in Ayurvedic medicine out of India for probably at least 10,000 years. First of all, it's anti-inflammatory and it helps with pain. So like even just applying plain old castor oil, let's say if uterine cramps, it helps with pain and it's anti-inflammatory. But also something that the West doesn't know about is that it's very anti-anxiety because it's very heavy and sticky and kind of weighs. Now this is pure castor oil. We made sure not to have that much in the formulation that you feel that sticky quality, but it weighs down the nerves and it really feeds the nerves and kind of, and both cools them off, but heats them up in a very unique way. So just a plain old oil that's actually dramatically overlooked. It's also great for your liver, but that's a separate thing. So that's in both formulations. Something else that's in both formulations is an herb called Mucuna pruriens, or kapikachu in Ayurveda. It's an Ayurvedic herb that's made its way very robustly into Western medicine because it actually has dopamine effects. It increases dopamine. And so it's been used in a lot of clinical trials for both depression and Parkinson's, actually, because it has L-DOPA, which upregulates dopamine. So it's really good for nerve health. That's how it's traditionally used in Ayurvedic medicine. It's a nervous system tonic, an adaptogen of the nervous system, as well as for reproductive health, especially for men, actually. So it's used for women too, but it's actually considered what we call a vajikarana or an aphrodisiac herb because it increases also something called ojas, which is like our immune system and our hormone system. So in Ayurveda, there's a lot more to it than just this has L-DOPA and it's good for depression and Parkinson's. But it's a heavy hitter. It's a really great herb. Then in both formulations is ashwagandha, which is probably one of the most, if not the most famous Ayurvedic herb. And it's used mostly in the West for stress, chronic stress, because it's an adaptogen, like we've talked about extensively. But what's interesting about it being an adaptogen is that it really helps regulate cortisol and therefore the hormones, metabolic hormones, including adrenal hormones, which is cortisol, thyroid. There's a lot of evidence for it for improving thyroid function. And then sex hormones. Again, ashwagandha actually primarily targets male sex hormones. It's a phytoandrogen, so it helps with male reproductive hormones and building testosterone, for example. But in low doses, it also helps with female reproductive integrity. And then for all, in Ayurvedic medicine, it's one of the number one nerve tonics or nerve health tonics, and really great for anxiety in Ayurveda. It's the go-to. Now, for one of our formulations for I Am Resilient, I balance the ashwagandha with shatavari, which is kind of like the female counterpart or consort to ashwagandha. So shatavari definitely has more of a phytoestrogen effect and helps to build female reproductive health in a big way. But again, it does that primarily by reducing stress hormones. So when you reduce stress hormones for women, their sex hormones are more magnified in a helpful way. So they're both there to kind of balance each other out, the masculine and the feminine. And they, like I said, shatavari has less of a nerve impact. Ashwagandha has more of a nerve impact, but too much of it isn't always good for women. They're there to balance each other out and super safe in that way, and can be used super long-term in Ayurveda, like lifelong, and for people's health. Another Ayurvedic herb we used is gotu kola or Centella asiatica. It's one of Ayurveda, and this one has also been co-opted by Western medicine in a big way. But it's one of the number one herbs for brain health and for mental clarity and focus. But what's interesting is it's not stimulating. It's not like ginseng or something else that can help people focus, but it kind of ramps them up. Gotu kola is very balancing and calming, but it also helps. We call that a nootropic, or something that increases cognition. Something else I love about gotu kola and why it's in both is that it's really great for skin health. It's being used extensively now in dermatology formulations because it helps to repair collagen and connective tissue. It's great for any sort of connective tissue disorder. I work with a lot of those clinically, and it's one of my go-tos. So it's supporting the skin and all of the connective tissue, especially when it comes to things like pain, tendons, ligaments, muscles, etc. But you also have this very clear brain and heart sort of opening aspect. Something else that's used, this is a Western herb that's used in both products, is kava or kava. Piper mysticum is the Latin name, and it's definitely a heavy hitter for anxiety, but a lot less sedating than something like valerian or some of the other heavy, like California poppy. Those are more sedating, but it definitely helps with anxiety and nerve health in general. And then something that was part of my training that people never think about for kava is that it's a muscle relaxer, and it has a particular affinity for the pelvis. So any sort of painful pelvic conditions, which of course enormous amounts of women have painful pelvic conditions of all sorts, it relaxes that pelvic floor and relaxes the spasms. But I've used it as a muscle relaxer for people with spinal cord injuries or cerebral palsy. I mean, any sort of muscle spasms, it works tremendously for. So that's why it helps with the pain, but also calming action. Another
PMS, a lot of people.
What's that? MS?
PMS is good for PMS.
PMS, yeah, absolutely. Really helps to just calm people, chill people out. Now, another one that is a traditional Ayurvedic herb that's been co-opted again in a big way in Western medicine, as well as other branches of medicine, is saffron. So saffron traditionally has been used for nerve health and gut health in Ayurveda majorly. But what's really interesting is there's a ton of new clinical evidence coming out on it for depression and for cognition, like actually like human trials for ADHD, kids with ADHD, and using it as an alternative to stimulants. So it really helps with focus and clarity, depression. Another big area of research for it is satiety signals. So helping people feel full when they're actually full. And so there's some degree of evidence that it helps with weight loss by regulating the neurotransmitters and hormones that are causing somebody to be excessively hungry, like leptin resistance or dysregulation in dopamine and self-control, et cetera. So it kind of works on all of that, but and it also smells great and is incredible for the skin. But really it's more of an uplifting herb, again, without being stimulating, and really good for nerve health overall, and for also detoxing the nerves. Cacao is obviously a South American herb that has been co-opted into Western herbalism, and clearly I think most people know it helps with depression. It has serotonergic properties, meaning it increases serotonin, so it helps with depression, focus and clarity. It does have some very mildly stimulating effects to help the brain focus, and just general overall nerve health because of the serotonin effects. And it makes people feel subjectively good. And it smells good. But there's actually a lot going on with cacao in terms of its phytochemical profile, and it's one of my favorites. So that's in both as well. Another spice, not that cacao is a spice, but saffron is, that we use, that is used extensively in Ayurvedic medicine, but really hasn't made its way into Western herbalism or medicine, is nutmeg. Nutmeg is one of the heaviest sedatives found in nature. So we're just using a tiny little bit for the smell. It helps increase digestion as well, including digestion at the mental level. In Ayurveda, we think of digestion as a mental process as well as a physical process. So it's very calming for anxiety and being ramped up. It also decreases blood pressure if somebody has high blood pressure, and again, supports the nerves and the digestive capacity, which is really important. Only a few more that are in both. So CBG, cannabigerol, that is in both formulations. It is a cannabinoid. It's non-psychoactive, so it's hemp-derived. It does not cause people to feel high. It's the mother cannabinoid, so it's the first cannabinoid that the cannabis and hemp plant both make before it differentiates into both THC in one lineage and CBD in the other lineage. So it's one of the simplest cannabinoids as well. And it helps with a ton of things. So it's great for the immune system. It's anti-inflammatory, a little bit less so than CBD, which we'll get to, but it's still great for the immune system, anti-cancer, a lot more uplifting than CBD, which is definitely more sedating. So it really helps with depression. I always say CBG for giggles because it makes you feel really good. Nerve health, it's neuroprotective, it's neuroplastogenic, incredibly helpful for the nervous system, recovery from traumatic brain injuries, things like that. And then gut health. I also always say CBG for giggles and gut because it really helps digestive function when taking it orally, but also systemically through the way that we're doing it. So definitely less sedating than CBD, but super uplifting, non-habit forming. I could go on and on and on. It's one of my favorite phytoconstituents. Then we get, well,
just to interject quickly, and we'll talk more at the end about this. Everything is super carefully sourced. We're going to talk more about that. That's a very important thing for us. Everything is organic. And the CBG in particular has 0% THC.
Exactly. Yeah. And tested to be confirmed each and every batch, 0% THC. So non-habit forming, non-addictive, non-psychoactive traditionally in that way. So then a non-herbal component is magnesium, which is obviously a mineral. And so why magnesium? Well, a lot of reasons. One is that our soil has been dramatically depleted of magnesium. So most people, if they're not supplementing, unfortunately, are deficient in magnesium. And magnesium is really important for calming the nervous system and the nerves, and for being a muscle relaxer as well, because it vasodilates, it relaxes muscles, it calms things, just through the way it works on the nervous system primarily. And so again, most people are deficient. So most people have to supplement, but this is highly bioavailable. So it's driven into the tissues, definitely supports nerve health. And again, acts as a muscle relaxer, not only to just have the somatic relaxation, when you're feeling really stressed and clenched up, but also for pain. If there's a pain component, it'll relax those muscles. Two more ingredients that are in both formulations that are clinically relevant. One is helichrysum essential oil, which not a lot of people know about, but it's one of the most precious and expensive essential oils. But the reason I use it in both is that it's very useful for depression and for, again, bringing, when somebody's feeling really low, it's uplifting. It kind of helps to bring the energy up. But it's also very useful for muscle pain in particular. Applying it topically to your muscles, it relaxes the muscles. It's also an incredible wound healer, just phenomenal for the skin. So that's another reason I added it, because it's like totally a beauty herb in that way. And also any essential oil will drive the ingredients deeper into the tissues. So there's always that benefit of having an essential oil driver. So that's in both in varying ratios.
And it smells amazing. People are obsessed with how it smells.
Yes, it smells amazing. It comes from the Mediterranean. It's a great essential oil and a great herb in general, and also dramatically underutilized, probably because of cost, but we didn't want to skimp on the quality for cost. So it's there and it really helps. Last thing that's in both products that's, I would say, very clinically relevant and a heavy hitter is something called DMSO, which comes from pine plants. And it's just there to drive the ingredients deeper into the tissues and allow the nutrients and all of the things in the formula to be absorbed through the bloodstream. It also on its own is very helpful for pain. So there are clinical trials of it being used for painful conditions like interstitial cystitis, rheumatoid arthritis, other sorts of autoimmune arthritis, types of arthritis. So it is very helpful for pain, as well as, again, driving the ingredients deeper so that you can increase your blood level of these things. So then moving on, there are two ingredients that I haven't already named. There are other ingredients, but they're more about balancing the formula. So clinically relevant ingredients here for I Am Resilient, which is what we use for both for stress, anxiety, depression, mental balance, kind of reducing the effects of anxiety. One of them is L-theanine. L-theanine comes from tea, especially green tea. It definitely has a lot of research for calming anxiety, but again, very interesting in that it increases focus. It's a nootropic, meaning it increases cognition and mental processing. without being stimulating. It's calming. It's safe for kids even. And then it's also really good for nerve health. In general, it helps with nerves, but also the brain, which is kind of like a giant bundle of nerves. And then one other ingredient that I use also as a driver and essential oil for I Am Resilient is geranium rose. And a lot of people think it's rose, but it's not. It's geranium rose. And that's one of the best essential oils used for anxiety and for stress, because again, and depression, it's uplifting, it helps you feel better, but it's also calming. And it also, something I wanted to be cognizant of, I love lavender. I love people taking enteric-coated lavender oil for anxiety. It works great. But a lot of people don't like the smell of lavender, or if they did, and they've smelled it too much, they can start to have an aversion. And I didn't want anybody to be deterred by a super familiar smell that they might have bad associations with. So geranium rose is a beautiful, really amazing smell that balances out that whole formula.